different realities and mayhem, sisterly conflict, and also some ships are sinking while some ships are so setting sail. Oh my gosh. All while the source awakens. CW's Charmed, Season 1, Episode 22, the season finale, review and breakdown. Hey y'all, it's your Twisted Girl Next Door here, and oh my gosh, we made it to the end of the Season 1 of the Charmed reboot. And I don't even want to call it the reboot anymore. It is Charmed. It's earned its title as being Charmed, and I think we can stop calling it the reboot after this season because, oh my gosh, so much happened, and I just want to definitely get into it because we've got so much to talk about. Can we talk about some of this stuff? Because so much awesome stuff happened, and some stuff happened that I wasn't necessarily happy with, and I want to get into it right now. So what I'd like to do for this particular video, because it's the Season 1 finale, is a little bit of a tweak of the normal breakdown. So what I want to do is my overall thoughts of the episode, as in my overall thoughts of the episode, the major happenings in this episode, as in the major happenings of this episode, and my thoughts on that. And then we need to talk about ship talk. Oh my gosh, because you know I love talking about ships, and oh my gosh, I particularly want to talk about this show's ships, because there were some awesome things that happened and not so awesome things that happened that I want to delve into. And I kind of want to talk about the overall ship and romance that happened in this whole entire season when it comes to the show as well. Then I want to talk about my hopes and predictions for Season 2, along with an assessment of the overall season, some highs and some lows, some things I want to take into Season 2, and some things that I hope they leave behind in Season 2. And then finally, although I don't want to spend too much time on this, I do want to address a little bit of the hate that the reboot Charmed has gotten in its Season 1 that I think has put it up against some odds that it didn't really deserve to get put up against. And you know, just talking about some of that hate and how it's unnecessary. So I want to touch on that just a little bit, but you know, I don't want to touch too much on the negativity because we don't got time for all that. I may be getting one of my ships, so I am too blessed to be stressed. So overall, this was an unconventional season finale. There was no major big bad that occurred in this particular episode because we kind of got rid of all the big bads in the previous episode, as I talked about in my previous video, and how quickly that happened. And I think overall what we got with this episode, and perhaps with the whole season in general, and I'll talk a little bit about this more in my Season 1 assessment, is an origin story. You know, we kind of got, you know, their beginnings and the trials and tribulations, and them kind of, I guess, really solidifying the bond of the sisters, because we got that throughout, but I think this episode showed the cracks in that, in particular with Macy, because she's such the central focus of the show, that they needed to work that out. Now, do I think they totally worked it out? I'll get into that, but it would appear that they want to move forward, and I think that's what we got with this particular episode, that they needed to, at the heart of all of this, at the heart of them being able to move forward as the leaders of the supernatural world and all of that jazz, they needed to really solidify their relationship as sisters. And this particular episode dived deep into what was causing the rift when it came to that. And so I appreciated that. It was definitely an unconventional season finale, because usually you get the defeat of the big bad in the season finale and maybe a cliffhanger, and we got like small cliffhangers with little interpersonal stuff, but not necessarily like a big old, oh my gosh, you know, it's the end of the world next season and we got to dive into that. So not so much of that, but there were definitely some endings, and overall I was satisfied. Things go haywire as Macy takes on the source. Her major insecurity is revealed, and then finally the source is divided and spread across the globe, and yeah, that happens. I think the deep dive into Macy's insecurity was long overdue. We saw some bits and pieces of that, but I appreciated that they went into it a bit more. One could say that the source, all of a sudden hearing that the source, you know, plays up people's insecurities, which was kind of thrown in this episode, that little tidbit of a fact, really could be used as maybe a plot point of what the writers maybe really wanted to do, which was get into Macy's character in the sense of her insecurity and what was stopping her from moving forward and being, the power of three. And so I think it was long overdue. The actresses did a phenomenal job with it, and I'm glad that it was put out in the open, this depth that she has when it comes to, I'm talking about Macy, when it comes to abandonment issues, when it comes to not wanting to open up completely, when it comes to being guarded, when it comes to being completely organized all the time and trying to be a people pleaser and apologizing so much. And I liked that they didn't just leave that as like a character quirk, but they really dived, deep within the supernatural realm of why that may be. I thought the different dimensions were cool. I thought it was very sad about Marisol, just the idea that her destiny is to die, right? And no matter what reality that they find themselves in, she's supposed to die, which really sucks. And I mean, that was one of the things in the heart of this season as well, right? Because they lost their mother, particularly Mel and Maggie, who grew up with her. And so, there's that conflict that keeps resurfacing there. And I like that they've done away in this particular season of bringing her back in innovative ways where she's helpful at some times. Other times it's, like this with the different realities and the mayhem of it. And it's fresh each time. And each time we see how cool Marisol is. Oh my gosh, this character is so awesome. So that's awesome. But then she continues to play a role in her daughter's lives. And they do it in a way where it doesn't feel too repetitive and it works. And even in this particular case, she served a purpose in just showing that destiny, no matter what, will happen. Mel, Maggie, and Harry show Macy that they will not abandon her. And this gives her the strength to decide to give up the source the way they do. Macy forms a plan to divide the source in her pendant, which she now doesn't have, I guess, because they broke it apart. So I don't know what that's going to do later, but she does not have the one, gift she got from one of her parents, not her mom, but, so they divide that up in the source. They each take a piece, they spread it across, in different places, and then Harry removes their memory so that nobody knows where it's at. And I thought that was fitting. I particularly thought that they were going to divided amongst themselves so then they could, rule. But I think they still need to get used to being witches and stuff, and giving them that sort of power boost, even if it's 1/3 of a power boost, is probably too soon, to do that. Also, what comes out of this is that Galvin, who Macy had brought back to life in the last episode, and then we saw him alive in this episode and feeling like something wasn't right and whatnot, he had to die. Once again, that was destiny coming through. He died for those people who were affected by the plague, and because Macy had brought him back to life, death was the universe was kind of taking its karma and letting those people die, and so Macy couldn't fix that, so she had to let Galvin die, and so that happened. I'll get a bit more into that with the ship talk of the ramifications of their romance, but yeah, so Galvin, it seems to be really dead because they went to his funeral. Now, what I didn't care for when it came to the Galvin situation was Mel's meddling in that. And I want to talk a little bit more about Mel's meddling when it comes to this particular plot point and how that was, let's be real here. Throughout this whole season, Macy and Maggie were not the issue with each other, right? And I was glad that they put it out there of Macy straight up telling Mel, maybe you're the problem. Maybe you've been so unwelcoming to me that has caused this issue between us constantly. And so I think Mel showed that when she went behind Macy's back to go talk to Galvin. That's not your place to do. She straight up brought this guy back from the dead. Do you think it's your place to hint at him something, such a major secret like that? Has Macy ever gone to Nico and hinted at her that, you wiped her memories without her consent? You know what I mean? So that was a little weird that happened, and it really made me mad because Mel was so I've come to like Mel, I have, but when I first started watching the show, I couldn't stand her. And they kind of let it taper off a little bit with her personality where it wasn't so aggressive to the point of being unlikable. But I don't know, for some, maybe they were trying to drive home the rift between the sisters, but for whatever reason in the first like 20 minutes or 30 minutes of this episode, I was just like, oh my gosh, Mel, shut up. Like, and I actually was giddy when Macy was throwing her around the house. And I'm telling you, because I was just like, you kind of deserve this. You kind of deserve Macy throwing you around like a rag doll right now, because you're kind of a hypocrite a lot of the time. And I don't think, you're so quick to point out everyone else's issues and be so judgmental to everyone else that you never seem to reflect on the other stuff you do. I think also I enjoyed the different reality looks, because if you, stop and think about what was going on in each of those different realities depending on what was happening, is one, it definitely did show that all three of them need each other to be as well-rounded as they have become after this season 1. That was shown. But if we can also point out the fact that in the reality that Macy wasn't around at all, there was clearly an apocalypse going on, right? Like, it was clearly chaos on Earth. And that was telling to me, because they did one scenario where Macy ended up with Marisol, and so Mel wasn't around, but still the world was okay. She didn't like snuff Mel out of existence, but she made it so she just lived a normal life somewhere else, and everything was fine. I mean, yeah, it was kind of bleak. Her and Maggie weren't close, Macy and Maggie, and, Mel had never met Maggie and everything. It was kind of bleak, but it was still a normal existence, and even Harry was their white lighter. But the world where Macy didn't exist at all was apocalyptic. And I would like to point out that that's significant to me, because I think that just shows the idea of how central that Macy is when it comes to the universe that they're in. So yeah, haters can suck it. The charmed ones are now in charge. So that's a major shakeup, right? So basically, after everything goes down, they spread the source around and end up in a cemetery, and there's a shippery moment that I'll get to later. And so they're walking back from Galvin's funeral, and so there's some supernatural creatures there, and there's throwbacks to throughout the season, the people they've helped, the supernatural people that they came across, and they're asking them, okay, the elders are all dead, who's going to be in charge? You guys are the natural default, so there you go, leaders. And so what we have is a major shakeup in a way, which I think we all saw coming, right? I figured, like I said, that they were going to be divided up with the source and then be the leadership. But I think, honestly, with them already being the charmed ones, it was already established that because they were the charmed ones, they're the most powerful witches together. And so it does make sense by default. And since, let's just be honest, like I said last video, those elders didn't seem all powerful, to be honest with you. And since most of the Circana are dead, so they aren't going to be making any power plays, that leaves the witches. So I think this is a very interesting take to do. What you kind of have going on here is a new world order, not with like power corrupts like it was with Macy, but what you have is, not to necessarily bring up the old Charmed just yet, because I want to talk about that a little bit later in the video, but, in the original Charmed, the kind of push and pull was the fact that the Charmed ones were constantly having to deal with the elder bureaucracy, right? They were constantly having to break their rules, deal with them being mad at them, and kind of trying to save stuff, but the elders always trying to put rules on them, even though the Charmed ones were the most powerful. So it was kind of like, why are these elders being able to tell the Charmed ones what to do? And that was kind of the push and pull of a lot of the original Charmed. So I think by making it so that there are no elders, you take away that major kind of dynamic, and it really just opens it up for a whole different kind of show, right? And this is what I mean by they definitely made a direct choice to kind of go down a divergent path when it comes to the show's direction. And like I said, showrunner change and some changes behind the scenes and also some major changes storyline wise, you see that definitely being the case. But I think it opens them up to so much more to do, right? Like, not only will they have to do like the regular thwarting of demons and monsters and, bad supernaturals, now they'll also have to deal with like the governing of the supernatural world, like, power plays and different things going on. So I think it just opens up so much more and makes them even more centralized, and it just puts things on a higher stakes. And I think that really works, and I think this was a good move. And can I fangirl for a moment about Macy closing the door with her mind just like Prue did in the first season? Like, oh my gosh, yes. You know why I say that? Because, once again, I'm talking about the OG Charmed only because it's the season finale and all the comparisons that have happened with it. I actually watched the original Charmed for like the first 3 seasons. You know why it was only the first 3 seasons? Because Shannon Doherty left after the 3rd season, right? She came back for like, I think the very beginning of the 4th season so they could kill her off. And yeah, so that happened, and she was my favorite witch. And once she left, I wasn't really, too concerned with the other witches because I just didn't like the new dynamic. And so I really do feel like Macy, with this reboot, it was kind of like maybe the creators kind of doing a do-over in the fact that, we didn't have, we lost Prue like halfway through the original show's run. And so Macy, to me, is very much like the Prue character, kind of guarded, sort of the default leader in terms of being the older one, being the one that's a little bit more experienced with the hardships of life because she, grew up, without her parents and things of that nature, or at least, not both of her parents for her whole time and stuff like that. And so I really liked the character of Prue. And so I think, yes, it was a nod to the original, but I think it was also kind of a saying to, I don't know, I feel like it was solidifying just like the importance of Macy's character and what she represents in the terms of just the plot line and the narrative of what we're dealing with. And this season finale, if anything, was really also setting the tone for the romance and interpersonal dynamics that we're set to see in season 2 and the new direction, or the tweaked direction, that the show is trying to go in. So it was definitely a big episode for the ships. And that makes sense, although, yes, Charmed is about sisterhood and the centralizing of the sisters bond, but let's be real, this is a CW network show. We're here for shipping, and to a certain degree when it comes to character. Of course, you want the plots and the supernatural and the great stuff of narrative to be awesome, but in the mix of that, what adds the flavor is the interpersonal dynamics, and that includes the romance. And I think this was a big episode for the ships when it comes to those that sunk and those that have seemingly set sail. Maggie and Parker. All right, so Parker left town because he wants to get his demon side in check. And this was after Maggie basically told Mel and Macy that she was okay with dealing with Parker's demon side. And she felt, on top of the world in the sense that they had just dealt with Macy as the source, and so Maggie was feeling like, hey, if we could deal with that, I can deal with Parker's demon side. But it would appear that Parker does not feel the same way because he wants to leave town. And at first, I guess he wanted Maggie to come with him. Now, I don't know how that makes sense, right? Yeah, that doesn't make sense because he wants to leave her to get his demon side in check, but then he's like, oh no, you can come with me. So which is it? Do you want to stay away from her because of the demon side, or do you just want to leave the town because it reminds you of your parents? I didn't get that necessarily, but nonetheless, they broke up. They kissed. We heard Maggie's thought of I will always love you, and Parker also promised to come back once he got his demon side in check. Okay, so I've already said in the last video my thoughts when it comes to them trying to build Maggie and Parker as an epic love story, and I thought it was too soon. I thought it was kind of premature. So I think this had to happen. I don't necessarily know if he had to leave town. I feel like this could have gone one of two ways. Now, if they were going with the unrequited love or like constant conflict, then he could have went evil, straight up evil. And they could have dealt with next season him just being a baddie and still having feelings, and Maggie still having feelings for someone who went totally evil. Although I think they kind of did that with OG Charmed. I think the whole thing with Cole or something. I digress. What I'm saying is they could have went that route and keeping Parker around. for whatever reason, they decided that he needed to leave for a bit. And I don't know if that was because of the switch behind the scenes or if that was always the plan, but I predict what they're going to probably do with that is the idea that Maggie is going to seemingly move on or at least start dating people, and maybe there might be a new guy that she really does like, and then Parker comes back like maybe halfway through, and then we have a triangle on our hands. I think that's the only way this can go if Parker does return. Because the issue with this ship, as I said before, is this whole thing, if their main issue is the demon conflict, I think the writers kind of wrote themselves into a corner when it came to this ship, because if he was really dealing with his demon side, as in, he has really evil tendencies and maybe he's really doing evil stuff, but he really loves her, so he wants to turn good, but he can't completely shake it, that would have made a little bit more sense. But the way they treated this plot line with Parker was more so that his demon side was a disease, like he was like literally fighting an illness, right? So it wasn't necessarily that he wanted it to be evil, but that he would turn into some mindless entity that was straight up just total demon, which didn't necessarily make that much sense because Alistair was able to function like a seemingly human, even though he had an evil side. Same thing with Hunter. So yeah, I guess maybe it was because he was half demon, half human that the mixture of it made something so monstrous. I'm not sure. They didn't really explain that. So they kind of wrote themselves in a corner in doing that, because I'm not going to say they neutered Parker. I'm going to say that they didn't give much space for him to kind of be evil baddie who can still kind of stay around even if him and Maggie aren't together. And I think the last episode showed that, because when he was evil, like I said, he looked like a My Chemical Romance reject, and it wasn't like sustainable. He just looked sick, and he didn't look like super baddie, right? Like cool baddie pop collar like we've seen before. So I think they kind of wrote themselves in a position where he had to go. There was no way they were going to be able to keep him around and continue with that kind of ship, because let's be real, when you have a ship, you don't need conflict all the time. A ship doesn't have to always be in conflict. You can have happiness with a ship and they're dealing with stuff together as problems arise. You can totally do that. But usually that's after like a couple of seasons of the push and pull dynamic. And I think the mistake they made with Maggie and Parker is that they put them together as this epic romance way too soon, so that the only thing that was keeping them apart was this demon side business. And so it wrote them in a corner. So he kind of has to leave town unless we just want to saddle Maggie with a guy who's totally just in love with her. And that's that. It kind of just shortens the possibilities of her plot line, especially as the youngest one. But I don't think it's the last we've seen of him. I think Parker's going to return. I think it's going to be after Maggie finds someone else. Mel and Nico. All right, so Jada seems completely gone. Like, there was no mention of Jada. I guess she's just left town. I guess that's just that. I don't know if that's with the new direction or what, but she was not mentioned at all. Mel didn't seem broken up or concerned about what happened to Jada, except that, she left town. And so that left Mel and Nico. And it would appear that Mel told Macy that she was going to let Nico go. And so what we got was a non-dialogue scene of Mel being across the street, freezing time, Nico smiling, and then Mel leaving, and Nico sitting there very confused. I didn't get it. I was confused. I was. Mainly because, one, I think this goes back to what I was saying about the issues that I have with Mel, of how she doesn't self-reflect. Like, there was a whole thing of trust in her wiping Nico's memories and stuff without her consent. And then you tell Macy, I'm going to let Nico go. You don't have a conversation with Nico. You just kind of disappear on her. Why aren't you giving Nico the choice to talk to you and say whether or not she wants to be let go? Maybe she doesn't want you to let her go. Maybe she wants to move on with you. But you wouldn't know that, Mel, because you didn't give Nico a chance to explain herself or get her thoughts together, or I don't know, have an opinion and a say-so in the ultimate decision-making of your relationship with her. I don't think it's the last we've seen of Nico. I think what it may be, Nico's not leaving town, right? So she's still going to be around. And I feel like because they do have feelings for each other, yes, Mel may move on, although I think Mel needs to be single for a bit, but Nico's still going to be around. So I feel like what we may get with them is a let's build up trust, let's be friends sort of a deal until we can't be friends anymore because those feelings are just too much. I think that's what we're going to get, because that's if this is like not the last time we've seen Nico. Macy and Galvin. Okay, so that's done because Galvin's dead, right? Just like Charity with Harry. Yeah, Galvin's dead. He chose to die. And he wanted his sacrifice to stay because he wanted to save those people. So he went out very noble. And I'm just going to say, once again, I think they would have been better off as friends. I don't necessarily agree with the killing off of Galvin for a number of reasons. One, because now this puts Macy in a position where she has to mourn him, which, all right. Even though they were together for like maybe all of a couple of weeks, because most of their relationship in season 1 was the push and pull and him dating someone else for a while too. So, but now that he's dead, she has to mourn him and kind of idolize him because he died a hero, and we're going to have to deal with that. And then I also didn't agree with it because I think if they hadn't made it so it was a romance and he was simply maybe a guy who worked at the hospital or the lab and they were friends and he would help them all out occasionally because he knew about their secret, this character could have stayed around. We could have had it so he stayed around. But because they tried to force this union that didn't work, and that's what happens on shows, when ships aren't working and then, viewers see a potential of another ship, it kind of puts one of those characters at peril if they're not the main character. And so I feel like Galvin was a casualty of this. And I actually liked his character towards the end. I liked his character when he wasn't dealing with the romance of Macy. I thought he was a very good character for the most part when he wasn't being the romantic partner of Macy. But because they kind of made that his central kind of thing, when it kind of became clear they were no longer going in that direction for Macy's character, which I'll get to what direction I think they're going to in a second, he kind of lost his purpose. So yeah, that's unfortunate because I don't think he needed to be killed off, but he died a hero. But I think they basically put the nail in the coffin of this ship. I think it's also telling that Macy didn't get to do a, really big goodbye to him because she came back into the reality and he was dead, right? And instead of being like, well, can I at least say bye to Galvin before this is it? We didn't get that. Galvin's last scene was with Mel. Like, if you think about it, right? His last scene was with Mel and him telling Mel to tell Macy to let him die. Harry and Macy. Yes. Oh my gosh. The ship is setting sail. Do you see it? It's sailing. Oh my gosh. The ship is sailing. It's on smooth, weird, maybe awkward waters, but it's totally sailing. And I saw the writings on the wall, or I saw the potential of Hasty, Harry, and Macy, but I didn't think we'd get it so quickly, or even a hint at it so quickly. I kept saying this is a slow burn, they have to deal with their other, relationships first, but this may have something to do with the change behind the scenes and the change of direction and maybe them wanting to give us a central couple going forward that they saw that people really liked, but it definitely seems like it is happening. Okay, so what happened in this episode was basically, Macy was all up on that source power. And then Harry comes in to reassure her and he touches her. And he says, we all love you. Your sisters love you. We all love you. And he touches her and she gives him a look and she's like, I can read minds now. And it was so awkward because she heard or felt something that was like, oh, what is that I'm getting from you? That doesn't sound like a brother figure or something like that. And oh my gosh, it got so awkward at that moment, but so cute and so funny because I like how Harry tried to play it off. Like he didn't even ask like, oh, what did you see? It was like, oh, and that just shows you he knew what she probably saw. So it's like a prominent thought in his mind whenever he's near her because he wasn't even confused. It wasn't even like, oh, okay, you can read my mind. What do you think you're seeing? It was like, oh, which was awesome. And then there were other moments between them as well that were really great. 2 other major moments. One of those moments was when Mel and Maggie in the attic went to Macy when she was on the floor and said, we're not leaving you. And, she was very, Macy was very relieved at that, but it wasn't until she looked up at Harry for reassurance that he wasn't going to leave that he says always. And she looked so happy in that moment. So it was like she was happy. So it was very telling that they made it so that, you know, she had one reaction to Mel and Maggie, but then she looks up to Harry for his reaction to see if he's going to leave her too. And he doesn't. He says, no, I'm staying here too with you, because he's a free agent at this point, right? So he's choosing to stay with them. Let's put that there too. Harry is choosing to stay with the witches. And that was totally a moment, the look that she gave him and he gave her. And then they hug and, you know, their faces are pressed up against each other. That was also awesome. But then we had the cemetery scene. One, the two of them were matching. Let's talk about that. They totally matched their outfits to be kind of like they were in the Southern Belle era or whatever like that at the cemetery looking at Marisol's grave. And in that moment, you know, first of all, Harry stays behind for some reason with Macy, right? He didn't have to, he does. He turns around and he's like, why are you looking at me like that? Because Macy's hecka awkward right now, right? She's like, because, you know, she remembers what she heard in her mind. So that definitely solidified. If you know, because they did release like a press release before the episode came out that kind of, if you read those sort of things, you would know that maybe Harry's feelings for her were going to resurface. But I felt like even if you hadn't read that, I think at least by that scene, it would solidify that, oh, he thought something towards her and now there's a little awkwardness between them. And so she asked if he wanted to talk about what she had heard, and he said, let's just forget it ever happened. And I think, for one, we all know we are not going to forget that it ever happened, and it is totally going to come up in season 2, which I am so here for. But oh my gosh, y'all, oh my gosh, Hasty, oh my gosh, this ship needed to happen. I think, like I said, with Maggie and Parker, they made it too epic, or they tried to make it too epic too soon, and they had nowhere to go. And what the show definitely needs, and it's narrative, it's plotting, this is how TV shows work, you need one central couple, right? You need that one central main couple that's kind of the back and forth and kind of the center hold of the show, even when the other relationships kind of come and go. You need that central focus. And it makes sense, since Macy is kind of the central focus sister, that she would kind of get the central focus relationship. And I think they basically told us that that's most likely going to be Harry and Macy. And so I think it really works. I think there's so much potential. I've already talked about in the previous video all the ways that there's so many plot lines they can do with the two of them, him being a powerful being, her being a powerful being, and still part demon, and what that means, all types of things they could do with this couple. And I think, I'm not going to say it's like he could be an angel to her Buffy in a way, but see, what you get when you have a ship that has two main characters as opposed to a ship that has a main character and a reoccurring character or a not main character is, even when they're apart, you get the angst still going. Because even if they're apart, he's still there. They're still dealing with each other. And so there's a whole dynamic there as well in the push and pull, whether they're apart or together, that just makes it so that, you know, you need a central focused couple. And I think they were the best option. And I think the writers for season 2 saw that. And also people were asking for it. I mean, people wanted Hasty. I know there were some people online who were like, oh, he's older and it's coming off like a father figure. I'm like, no. I think if anything, I don't even think he comes off as a father figure to Mel and Maggie. I think he comes off more like an older brother to Mel and Maggie. And I think with Macy, he comes off like a guy who kind of has a crush. And now we know it's not kind of, that he definitely has a crush on Macy. And do I think they were totally building it up throughout the season? Now, the way I feel about that is I saw the potential of it. We saw the little moments. We saw how he touched her a little bit longer than the others and stuff. But I will say, I don't think the writers, and I don't think the powers that be when it comes to the show, I'm going to say I don't think they thought they were going to go so quickly in the direction of Harry and Macy, that they were going to make it like a thing at the end of season 1. I think up until maybe like the last 4 episodes, there might have been a play to still have Galvin around. I'm going to say that. I think originally that maybe they thought they were going to try to build up Galvin and Macy as Macy being this powerful being and trying to make it work with a human guy. And that was going to be the kind of love story that they wanted to have for Macy. And I think somewhere along the way, with all the other switches in showrunners and the direction of the plot lines and seeing what worked and what didn't, I think they realized that wasn't working. And I think they saw the potential of Harry and Macy, and they saw stuff that was already there that they had already kind of put there. And I think they decided, okay, we're not going to wait much longer. Let's go for it now. Or at least make it so it's prominent now and not just something that the shippers see, you know, because we're great with our shipper goggles. But like, no, it's actually in the plot line overtly. And I think they made that decision maybe towards the end of the season. And I'm happy they did. I just, you know, I did want to kind of touch on that tidbit that I don't think we necessarily, if there wasn't a change of direction and things and a shakeup of the cast, that we might have gotten the prominent Hasty moment. But I'm not complaining. I love that they're going in this direction. Overall, with this season, I enjoyed it. I mainly enjoyed the Monster of the Week episodes when they got into mythology, and within that, there was the interpersonal dynamics that happened in the background as they were trying to thwart demons and bad supernaturals. I think that dynamic works better, and what I'm hearing is that they're doing that more for the season 2. And I love the family dynamic. I do. I just think, you know, certain things worked this season. I think when they allowed the sisters to dive into the witchcraft, to dive into mythology, to dive into mysteries that happen each week, that it worked. They were better episodes. I'm not just talking about like filler type stuff. I'm talking about like it plays into a bigger arc, but it also, you know, is dynamic and very much in the supernatural world with the interpersonal play within it. So I'm looking forward to more of that. I think certain things worked. I think when they gave Macy central focus, I think that definitely works. The actress is amazing, and I mean, just what we saw in this last episode shows that she has so much range, and I just hope we get to dive into her character even more. I'm hoping that maybe season 2 focuses on Mel being less judgmental or something. I don't need a character to be perfect. Characters don't need to be perfect. I think it actually works when characters have shortcomings, but I think it is glaring when things happen repeatedly and she doesn't seem to learn a lesson from it. And so maybe they'll dive into that a little bit more. I also think Mel needs to be single for a bit because she got to have 2 major relationships and neither of them really worked out or really worked as well as they could have for a variety of reasons. I would like to see Maggie more in college life. I want to see Lucy. I love Lucy, and hey, I love Lucy. I want to see more of her, and I'd like to see Maggie do more of a college girl thing and date around and things that come up as she's trying to be in college and figure out her career and her life and stuff, and not so much of this epic love story already happening. And so I think if they focus on that a bit more with her, it will be a lot more interesting too, and she can grow as a character. Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 2. When it comes to fandom, I usually keep it at arm's length. I went through the Vampire Diaries fandom, if anyone remembers that, and it was war. It was a war zone there when it came to the different ships, when it came to different characters. It was not pleasant. I was also in the Glee fandom, which was even worse. And so after those shows, I just kind of came to the point where I was like, I'm not dealing with fandom anymore. And because it can be a toxic place, it can be a hostile place when people don't get their storylines. And what we dealt with the Charmed reboot was, it wasn't even like the fandom of the show, right? We had to deal with another fandom of the whole Charmed universe, like the whole Charmed universe of the OG Charmed. And this is not to say that all of the OG Charmed fans were like hostile or hating on the reboot, because that's totally not the case. And I don't like blanket statements like that. But there were some vocal types who adamantly wanted this show to fail. They wanted the reboot to fail. I mean, you could say for a variety of reasons. I think some of it was racial for some people, but I don't think it all was racial. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of reboots either. I mean, honestly, you know, there are certain shows where I hear there's going to be a remake and I roll my eyes because I'm like, we don't need a remake. This was great. You know, these things happen. And so what I would hope for going into season 2 is that once again, like I said, I think they're really diverging from the original with this whole them being in charge and not having to deal with the elders issue or the rules, because they're making the rules. And so I think that's going to put it in a different plane. It's going to be a show about three witches who happen to be sisters, but the plot lines are going to be totally different for season 2 than what season 1 was in comparison to the OG Charmed. And I think that's a good thing. And I guess I would say that if you're not watching the reboot, then leave it alone, right? Like, you don't need to be up on social media hating the actresses and wanting to recast actresses for reasons or things like that, because hey, this isn't a show you're watching. Isn't life too short to be paying that much attention to a show you claim to hate? Like, stop watching it. Go watch the reruns of OG Charmed, okay? That's fine. And if you like both, it's okay to like both, right? Like, I loved the first 3 seasons of OG Charmed because Prue was on there. Oh my gosh, Prue. Shannon Doherty. Big ups to Shannon Doherty. Love her. Yeah, I know. But, yeah, I mean, you can like both. I wanted to give the reboot a chance because I was like, hey, this is a different dynamic. And also women of color, hello. So I think, I think hopefully going into season 2, there won't be so many people or, a section of people throwing so many negative vibes at a show they choose not to watch. I think we just need to move on. It's a different kind of show. The only same thing they have going for it is the brand recognition. And yeah, that's business. That's how it goes. And also, can we just stop with the nostalgia that makes it so we act like things in the past were like perfect? Because they weren't. Okay, like I just said, I stopped watching OG Charmed after season 3. You know why? Because there was a lot of drama behind the scenes when it came to the OG Charmed, particularly between Shannon Doherty and Alyssa Milano, right? And Shannon straight up left because she could not get along with Alyssa anymore. Like, she was done. And she was the lead of the show. She was the lead sister. And then they made, Alyssa's character the main sister. Anyway, and so it wasn't a perfect dynamic show. It wasn't like this kumbaya fandom and everyone was love and everything was great. Like, it really wasn't. So can we stop acting like everything was perfect in OG Charmed land and somehow this one is riddled with problems? Like, that's not it at all. And as a bonus, I'd like to say my fave line of the episode: "You have nothing to apologize for." Thank you, Mel. I think someone needed to tell Macy that because she's been apologizing way too much this season and she's got nothing to apologize for because she's a queen. Okay, y'all, so that was my review and breakdown and assessment of Charmed Season 1, the reboot, which I will stop calling the reboot for Season 2 because I think it deserves to stand on its own as simply CW's Charmed. And it was some highs, there were some lows, and oh my gosh, Hasty is selling. Harry and Macy, I cannot wait to see what they do with that dynamic. Oh my gosh, y'all, oh my gosh. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Do you have hopes for season 2? Are you kind of done after season 1? What were your favorite moments? What are you shipping? Do you think Mel and Nico ended on really awkward terms? Do you think Parker's going to come back? Do you think Mel will be allowed to be single for longer than 2 to 3 episodes when it comes to season 2? And also, what's going to happen with Harry and Macy? Are you okay with Harry and Macy? Do you think it was wrong that they killed Galvin? And also, be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my videos of all things horror, dark fantasy, and dark superhero. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.